I'm a huge believer that we can turn this crisis into something that can really change how cities operate and how they think about transportation.
As we emerge into the new reality of streets, starting to become clearer by the day, what are some key innovations, efficiencies you think cities can use to emerge from this as well as they can?
If we look at what does COVID-19 mean to citizens, so I think people are not going to want to get on trains or subways. I think people are going to be thoughtful about whether they want to be on buses. They may even be thoughtful about what they want to do with um, getting into a TNC vehicle or um, car sharing or a taxi, even because who knows who was there before them and what's the situation of the driver. So I think there could be a situation where we'd say, oh, what is going to happen is single occupancy vehicles are going to explode because everybody wants to try and stay safe, and yet they have to get where they need to go. So that's one trend or pressure that we have. Another pressure we have is that I think cities around the world have said, well, wait a minute, this lack of cars is awesome. Look, we can see the sky again. Venice, you can you can see through the water, and they've taken advantage of it, and they've opened up streets for people, pedestrians to use, or bicyclists. So, I mean, I think so. Those are the pressures, and then the third piece that's going to come into all of this at the very same time is we've really discovered the advantages of package delivery, food delivery. So you've got trucks and delivery vehicles, you've got all of the citizens probably in single occupancy vehicles, and we have the citizens wanting to use. So those are all three going to be competing for the space, and how we both allocate it statically, but then how we allocate it in real time is going to be a real opportunity. And so when you mention data, it's not so much data to say, oh, well, it looks like this is the usage of cars on an average, and so therefore we're going to open up the street or close the street statically. It's like, well, maybe we'll use the street as a drop off and pick off street for the morning, but during the day we'll let it be more of package delivery, and in the evening we're going to let the street be used by citizens so that they can play pick up soccer or something. So I think it's not so much data as information to allow you to make dynamic decisions.
Okay, so Hugh, you are president and CEO of Lacuna Technologies. Can you give a little 2-minute overview of Lacuna for our audience that might not know you and the company?
Sure, sure. So there have been a lot of problems that have come on for cities in the last 10 years by all these new emerging mobility devices. Of course, they help in many ways citizens, but they also can cause issues for cities. You know, think nav programs, routing a large number of cars down a side street because of congestion somewhere else, and all of a sudden the neighborhood has a ton of traffic. So we develop solutions based on open source software. We think open source is really key to how cities can both share best practices and continue to innovate in a way that doesn't lock them into any one vendor. And then the key thing that we're really focusing on, and it's going to be all the more important as we emerge from COVID, is to think about the streets and the air really as a public asset that is the citizens, and the city has stewardship of that, and how can they both essentially govern that asset and also manage it to generate as much revenue as they can from that asset. So I'd
Yeah.
say we're basically on a mission to join modern mobility with the public good.
So you touched a little bit about these three dynamic forces that we're going to have to make some decisions about. Um, Given that, what do you think transportation is going to look like in the next 2 years? And maybe talk a little bit about some of the urban air mobility thoughts you have.
Sure. So, first of all, at a high level, there's going to be dramatically less air travel. I think that there's going to be increased use of scooters and bicycles for some of the reasons that we talked about. Um, and I think there's going to be a lot more focus now on new mobility modes like autonomous delivery devices and drones. In particular, around drones, if you think about it, that's going to be a very, very important thing for cities, which they're really not thinking a lot about right now. So, classically, the FAA owns the airspace, and they, in particular, where they deal with cities, is they've got these magical things called airports, where the FAA controls all of the airspace above that particular airport. But they're actually in charge of the airspace today, currently, for the entire city. But cities control where these new drones might land or take off because they have land use and permitting obligations. So there's going to need to be effectively a negotiation and an agreement between cities who not just care about where drones land and take off, they care about how many of them are flying up and down a street, or where they fly, and what do they do when they have a malfunction. So cities are going to need to interact with and work with the FAA to make sure that this whole new mobility type happened. So NASA has established something called the Grand Challenge, which is sort of a prototype about how drones could interact with cities. And we were lucky enough, we're in fact the only effectively city representative that is there at the table with NASA and FAA and all these commercial operators saying, wait a minute, there are an enormous number of quality of life implications for people who live in cities. And we got to figure out how to come up with a balance between all of the amazing opportunities of aerial delivery and quality of life for our citizens. And that means that cities, through, quite frankly, software, are going to have to be helping manage this.
So cities are in a tough place right now, and it's gonna get tougher. So there's this piece in the New York Times about Mayor Bill de Blasio's what he's calling his wartime budget, with a $2 billion cuts, which includes cutting of their Safe Streets program and some other stuff. So, what's your reaction to these kinds of municipal budget crises that are looming, or that we're already in the midst of? And how do you think it's going to impact transportation and mobility as you see it?
Well, that's a big topic. I think, first of all, specifically about New York, they're going to have a tough couple years ahead. It's the real bottom line is the cities are going to need federal support to get out of this. There's no short-term solution that's going to fill the enormous budget gaps that they have. And then, as it moves more closely to what we all care about, I think they'll think carefully, and should be thinking carefully about, they've got this huge public asset called the streets, and increasingly even the air, and there are a whole set of commercial companies that have been using it and want to continue to use it, and I think that's a really big revenue opportunity for cities down the road.